Hey everybody, it's Todd Novak. Welcome to the Guitar Knobs. This is a precursor to the episode that we're about to listen to right now. We had such a fantastic time with Blackstar's Ian Robinson, who's going to just share an awful lot of fantastic information about Blackstar. It was so much that we decided to break it up into two episodes. One, the one that you're about to listen to, is the backstory on Blackstar. This is a brand that we are very familiar with, yet not very familiar with, and we're going to try to change that. So Ian's going to share where Blackstar came from, how it came to be, and why it matters. It was very enlightening, and I think we all have a new appreciation for Blackstar, at least here at the Guitar Knobs. So we hope you do too at the end of this. We will be releasing part 2 the week after this one, so be looking for that. Without further ado, here is part 1 of interview with Ian Robinson of Blackstar. Hey, welcome to Guitar Knobs, the guitars, gear, noise, and nonsense podcast, hosted today by these knobs.
Tony Dudzik, Picadian.
Billy Spitfire Unlimited.
Hey everybody, it's me, Todd Novak. Welcome to the Guitar Knobs podcast. We are thrilled to death that you are listening to our show, The Guitar Knobs, where we delve into the fantastic world of GAS, which is Guitar Acquisition Syndrome. Just so everybody knows.
I'm so excited.
And all things that we get all excited about with guitars and gear and the world that we love to be in. We have an extremely fantastic episode for you. We are going to learn all about a certain something, which we will introduce in just a little bit. Bear with us, because this caller is coming from the UK, and we have to be cognizant of his time. He's got a lot of things going on, and so we'll dip into that in a second.
And the phone rings differently there, too.
Sorry to keep you waiting. But in the meantime, we need to say thank you to like the THX thing, you know, at the beginning of the movies. We need to thank.
Spilled my popcorn.
Yeah, we need to thank Rode Mics for providing our audio equipment. They've been very kind to us. And
what about that Rodecaster Pro?
Yep, it's pretty sweet. Does the thing we needed to do. Tell you what, we have so much to talk about that we're gonna kind of like. Usually we chew the fat, hem the haw, and all that business at the beginning. We're going to get right into what's going on.
We're trimming the fat.
We're trimming it. What's going on in our music world this week? It was certainly full for a lot of us. So, Tony, go ahead.
All right, Todd. Well, this week I was perusing the latest issue of Vintage Guitar Magazine, and one of the articles is about the acrylic BC Rich Warlocks and the other BC Rich line.
I tell you what, I almost got that from Music Go Round. A couple of months ago, there was the orange one, I think.
Well, yeah. So the focus is, of course, on the BC Rich offerings, and I think those came out in 2000. But they also did a really nice recap of some of the other acrylic or plexiglass guitars.
Oh, that's cool,
including the Dan Armstrongs and the Univoxes and a couple of others.
That was that actually the first one? I know that Fender did one as well.
Well, I think that over the years, there were for NAMM shows and trade shows, companies would often put together, a clear or something like that.
I remember the first time I saw that because it was from What's Happening, and it was when the guys met up with the Doobie Brothers. And Raj famously said, "My name's Raj. Which doobie you be?" He said it. It was great. Anyways, but I remember seeing.
Is that when they jumped the Doobie Brothers?
Yeah, that's when they got Skunk Baxter, who was the famous handlebar mustachioed and beret wearing bass player. And I remember that was the first time I think I ever saw a clear bass.
Yes,
and I was like, "Whoa, what's that?" And I was a kid, so
I know.
Go ahead.
So anyhow, what I found interesting, and I actually learned a couple of things, is when they were talking a little bit about the Dan Armstrong clear plexi ones.
I had to play one of those in pep band in college. Ooh,
Oh, they're heavy.
The bass.
They're
Yeah,
heavy. But Dan Armstrong was a New York City-based builder.
Yeah.
And his assistant was Matt Umanoff. Now, Matt Umanoff now has a really great guitar shop in the New York City area. And the pickups were wound by Bill Lawrence. And it's just like all of these, like the perfect storm came together for these things. And sadly, I think what really killed them was the weight. I mean, in the BC Riches,
it took forever to get him.
No, not that weight. Not that weight. Not that weight.
You like that, Billy?
It's spelled slightly different.
Yeah.
Those guitars, and then I think even these BC Riches, because of the size
how
of
much
the
weight are we talking about, Tony?
I would say easily 15 to 18 pounds.
What?
Yeah, it's like your worst nightmare, Les Paul.
Wow. I mean, I'm a 10-pounder is kind of like doing me in.
Yeah,
so.
they're hefty,
Wow.
and I would think the BC Riches are probably even heavier because the bodies are bigger. But anyhow, this is kind of a nice trip down memory lane and in the world of clear and sometimes color acrylic.
Well, you can see
flexing.
where it looks like they're trying to alleviate some of the weight on that last one.
Yeah,
there.
a little bit.
I'm
but
pointing at an image that nobody can see. What is that model?
That is a Renaissance acrylic guitar. Yes, Renaissance.
Okay. They basically scooped out the whole butt end of what looks to be like a Thunder's, like a double cut.
So it's like a really heavy Parker Fly.
Yes. Okay. Yeah, exactly. So anyhow, that's what I did. So grab your Vintage Guitar magazine, the one with GA20 on the cover.
All right. That sounds fun. Billy, how about yourself?
Well, hey, as you know, I've been diving into the art world, taking classes at the local cultural arts center, and one day they discovered that
He says taking classes. He has over 100 paintings he's already done. So it's not like you just picked up a crayon yesterday, dude.
All right, well, okay. It's 200, and it's only happened in the last couple of years, so, whatever. Anyway, they found out I was a musician, so they said, hey, how would you like to do a Conversations and Coffee? So I'm going to play. I'm going to present some paintings and sing some songs that go hand in hand with the paintings, and to do that, I'm going to use my hollow body Rockabilly X160 from Guild.
Oh, wow.
It's a Korean-made one, from the, 90s, 2000s. And so I was pulling that thing out, and I love that thing. Yeah. It's just, it's loud enough you can strum it in the living room and be able to accompany yourself while you're practicing, but you can plug it into anything, and it just sounds amazing.
It's a handsome guitar, too.
Ooh, mine's blue.
What about you, Todd?
Well, I had the.
I know what Todd's doing.
What? No, not that. Not that. Silly.
Yeah.
That's for the next one. That's for the next one.
Okay.
But I've mentioned my daughter has done bass things in the past and has used the now famous Stinky. The bass called Stinky, which is I think it's if I recall correctly, it's an 82 PV Fury, which is the old version of the PV logo and the script writing and everything is, and I've talked about that ad nauseum. The thing is with that bass, the neck is quite narrow. Even more than a jazz bass. I mean, it's like maybe an inch and a half. It's not even. I don't even know if it's that. I mean, at the nut, it is really narrow. It's
3/4 of an inch.
Is it?
No,
it could be. It's almost like a violin, man.
No, it's wider than that.
It isn't that much. I mean, honestly, it's really, really narrow. But and some people can find that very comfortable, right? But the thing is. My daughter, who's quite tall, also has quite long phalanges. Her fingers are very long, and I was watching her play, and she was having to compensate in a really odd way to allow her like their actual finger pads to hit the strings, and I said, Self, we need to sort this out, Self. So not to give, because I like being surprisey and stuff. I said, hey, I got to run some errands. Why don't you come with me? Oh, by the way, we got to stop into Music Go Round because there's a pedal that just popped up that I traded that I want to grab. And she said, oh yeah, that'll be fun. We go down there, and I did this big thing. I was looking in the cabinet, and I was all upset because it wasn't there. And I said, let's look at it again, and can you see if there's, maybe it's in here? And I was so upset because somebody got it. And then she said, well, Dad, I'm sorry. And I said, well, why don't we just go get that bass that I was going to get free anyways? And she's like, what? So we went over and we played a bunch of the basses and stuff. And we picked out the one that made sense. And then she said, wait, so what about your pedal? And I said, sweetheart, that was just a big ruse. I just wanted to surprise you. And so she got her very first guitar. And
nice.
It's a Squier P bass. Nice. And it's solid. It's perfect for what she needs.
Yeah.
And
you can't beat a P bass. You can't.
I mean, it's great, and it's in fantastic condition. It was totally affordable. But I said, what we need to do, and guess who we saw there? Steve.
Oh, of course, Steve.
We saw Steve, who was on the show for our guild.
That's right.
No, Gretsch.
Gretsch.
Yes, for the Gretsch episode.
Yes.
And so I said, what we need to do? And I looked at him, and he goes, you need a good pick. You need a proper custom pick guard on that.
Proper.
So what we're going to, and Jane was really excited about that. And so she's going to go down there, and Tony's going to show her the materials, and we'll figure out which one looks best on it. And then she goes, now I got to name it. And I said, well, that's immediately she was like, this is my thing. And I was like, that made me so happy.
Nice.
Anyway, so that happened.
That's cool.
And it was really fun. And she's so excited about it. And she was playing it for hours when she got it back, which was great. That's what you want to do. No use playing something if you don't feel good playing it. All right, we have a very special guest on the, and when I say special, I mean very special guest on the line. Special guest, who are you?
I'm Ian Robinson from Blackstar in the UK, based in Northampton Town.
All right.
How are you?
We are, well, I think we might be doing a little better than you are. I mean, you might be doing a little better than we are.
I'm very pleased because England have just this moment qualified for the quarterfinals of the World Cup.
Yeah.
And,
congrats.
Thank you. We're just about to, in a week's time, we're going to meet our great adversaries, the French. So we're going to be playing France.
Oh. Well, just remember who tied you 0-0.
Honestly, you were great. You were absolutely great. You were the best team we've played, I think.
Yeah. Well, it was all due to Tony. So
yes, you might have seen me out there on the pitch.
Yeah.
Oh, really? Yeah.
Yeah. Well, so as we mentioned, everybody, Ian, who is managing director at Blackstar Amps and has so much contributed to the entire world of Blackstar, as we may, or as we will talk about, may not know about. So,
yes.
Ian, it is a pleasure and an honor to have you here. And aside from learning more about Blackstar Amps, we've got two really fantastic products that we're going to be addressing squarely.
Yum.
Yes, indeed. And that is the St. James line of amplifiers, as well as a very, very interesting and special product that is called the Billy.
The Amped one or the Amped one? Which is it?
I think it's the amped one, but it is an amp pedal, so that's where it came from.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, there you go. So we were doing a little...
I'm amped up about it.
Yeah. We were doing a little social thing, and Billy was doing the unboxing, and he goes, it's the Amped one. And Tony and I both said, no, it's the amped one. And he goes, yeah, but it's an amp pedal. And I'm like, oh, that's a good point. So anyways, more about that to come.
Clever.
Please, if you have a chance, go to Blackstar Amps online and see, get yourself familiar with the St. James line and the Amped 1. We'll just go with Amped 1 for the podcast. If people choose to say tomato later, that's fine. So one thing that I think is really at the top of my list to discuss with Ian, aside from these amazing products, is, and we've been talking about this behind the scenes with him and his team, is that we have the opportunity to talk directly to, one of the key creators of the Blackstar brand and all the offerings, who has a storied background that we're going to dig into. And before we do that, I just kind of want to address something like right out of the gate, if you don't mind, Ian. So our internal team here and your internal team, we discussed that Blackstar Amps is one of those amps or brands, I should say, brands that it wasn't there, and then it seemed to be here. And because most of the amps that we're familiar with have kind of always been there. Yeah. People tend to be skeptical of, a spaceship landed and here's this thing, So there's a skeptical ability.
Yeah. We come in peace.
Skepticism. I don't know.
Skepticism. Thank you, Billy. That's exactly the word. Especially in a landscape that has storied titans of audio and music.
It's really ironic that, we, as a team and as a company, we are so unbelievably passionate about what we do. But I think we get dismissed far too easily, especially in the States, by people, I don't know, it's easy for them to just dismiss us for some reason because they don't really understand the story and the history and the expertise that we have, because we have a lot, and it's not just me. I've got a great team.
I remember going in, I think the first time I saw it, I think I was nosing around Guitar Center, and I was like, what's this? And I was like, that's cool. Blackstar sounds really cool. What is it? What does it sound like? Because instantly I looked and I said, Marshall, Fender, Fox, well, where does this fit? Right? And I'm simplifying for purpose of conversation, but when I was initially talking with one of your team members, Ollie, who's been fantastic, by the way, your whole team's been great, I was really excited because I was like, this is something we don't know a lot about. We're very enamored with the backstory, whether it's Joe Garage Builder, who's got 3 pedals out, or Blackstar Amps. So with that big setup, in an effort to give some element of emotional connection and signature to understand what does Blackstar mean to us as guitar players in our guitar world, could you shed some light on the backstory of Blackstar and as well as yourself?
I certainly can. I know all about this because it's kind of it's my, what can I say? My specialist subject is myself and Blackstar. I've got quite a lot to do with it, and I've been there since the beginning. So it's kind of a long story, but I think the first thing to say is that thank you very much for having us on. And it is really important for us to get out and be able to kind of tell the story. So Blackstar, as you probably know, we started in 2004. So that's a long time ago now.
Now it is.
18 years ago, yeah. But yeah, no, crazy. We didn't start making products till 2007 because we had like 3 years where there was 4 of us and we had no money. So we spent 4 years in my garage at the bottom of my garden, having left Marshall. So I'll talk about that. But we kind of spent 3 years doing technical research and research into every kind of element, especially a valve amp design in those days. And it was a really special time for us. But so there was a little gap between us leaving Marshall in 2004 and us getting into market 2007. But our background was we were all worked at Marshall, and I played guitar since I was about 12, I think. So it's a fucking long time ago. Pardon my French. It was a real long time ago. And
it's okay when English people cuss. It's not like real cussing.
No, it really isn't. It really isn't. Especially if you're from Manchester in England, then it's kind of a, it's actually, I wouldn't say compulsory, but it's just part of our. It's a part of our dialect.
Yeah, let's say. Even the vicars cuss. Is that?
They absolutely do. I'll try and be careful. But so I've been playing since I was about 12, and it was still is my absolute passion. And my absolute passion was how to get a great guitar sound. And I was brought. My brother was 10 years older than me, and he was in a band, and he was fanatical about guitar sound. And so we were in Manchester, but we listened to a lot of American music. So we listened to a lot of British rock. So say Judas Priest, Def Leppard, early Def Leppard, Free, Bad Company, Black Sabbath. So I was listening to that when I was 10, 11, 12, 13. That was what was in the house, Led Zepp, all this stuff. And then as I went through I used to sort of roadie for my brother when I was 13 or 14. And it was like we used to go around the guitar stores in Manchester, which is a big sort of industrial town in the north of England. I don't know if you can know. You probably know about a few bands who came from there.
Very familiar.
Yeah, and we used to go around these stores and try every single amp with every single guitar. And it was all the usual stuff, but mostly Marshalls and Laneys maybe, because we were after a rock sound. And we were invariably really disappointed with what we got in terms of a sound. So, and then I went into the studios, helping my brother do demos and stuff when I was again as a teenager. And I suppose I developed this sort of fanatical interest in trying to get the sounds that I was hearing on records, which really were very, very difficult to get out of the products. So that was the start of my interest, and I did electronics at university in Salford, which is like a conurbation of Manchester. It's two cities almost like joined together.
Quick note about Salford. The only thing I know about Salford is I used to have a poster of the Smiths, and they were standing in front of this thing that said the Salford Lads Club. And I actually made a screen print of it because I was like, this is really cool.
Mate, absolutely brilliant, mate. Absolutely brilliant. And I believe that, I don't know, I might get killed here because I'm a big Man United fan, but I believe the ground is technically in Salford, not in Manchester, so people tell me. So that's another little bit of a trivia for us. But so yeah, it was I went to university, and the only reason I did electronics was because I wanted to design guitar amplifiers. I had no other reason, because I was never that good at electronics, to be honest. I was fanatically sort of passionate about finding out why guitar amps sound the way they do, but I wasn't fanatical about electronics as such. But so I did 4 years. I did like an audio course, and then I did just standard electronics, or whatever you want to call it, at Salford. And then this is where it kind of gets interesting, is that at the end of that period, which was 1996, a fucking long time ago again, half my life ago, I was passing the notice board, and I saw an advert for junior design technician or something at Marshall Amplification. And honestly, Marshall had never ever advertised for graduates until that month. And the adverts on, I think I've said this before, the adverts on the job board at the university was like, British Antarctic survey require technician to live in the Antarctic. Or it was like international vacuum clean manufacturer requires microprocessor engineer to design. And it was just the worst jobs in the world. And then one day, so I didn't really have any hope of getting anything decent. And then one day I just walked past the board, and there it was. So I applied for the job. And I'd already done some like music stuff. So I've been building some pedals. I've been building some preamps. I went to get my interview. And then I was interviewed by Bruce Keir, who became Blackstar's technical director. So he was the chief engineer at Marshall for about 12 or 15 years, something like that. and this guy, there's a lot of bullshit spoken in our industry about people who are gurus and all that. He hated that term. He was just the best engineer I've ever met. And he interviewed me, and I had 2 interviews, and for whatever reason, he liked me. We got on. I think they employed me not because I was a great engineer, but because I played guitar in a certain style, which was quite modern in those days. So I was this was sort of mid-90s, so I was really into Alice in Chains and sort of heavy riffing, and a great sound. So because part of the interview was going in the sound room and playing some stuff, and I don't think anybody really in the design team was playing that kind of stuff at the time. So that was part of the reason they got me in, because they knew that I'd been playing JSIM 800 since I was like 13. I had a JSIM 800 100 watt and a 4x12 in my bedroom as my practice amp. Yeah, because my brother, he was a fantastic guy. He passed away a few years ago, but he was a fantastic guy. Even though I was his little brother, 10 years younger, he used to make me pay my way. So we bought a JSIM 800 for £200, and I paid 100, and he paid 100. He used it for gigs. He used it for gigs, and I used it for practice at home. So anyway, so Bruce, right? So this is kind of getting into it. So Bruce gave me the job at Marshall, and then I had an office next door to Bruce for the 8 years that we were there, and that was just the most amazing education. So you'll have to stop me at some point, because the story it just flows a little bit. But within 6 months, my first project was the Slash 2555 reissue. Wow. So that was kind of my first ever job, was reissuing Slash's amp and meeting him and going to rehearsals and all this crazy stuff. So I was, extremely fortunate.
Yeah.
So that's where I started.
Quick question on that. Do you think that entering into an amp that might have had a much higher profile or visibility, as opposed to like, a reissue or like some little combo or something like that, did that give you a leg up there?
To tell you the truth, so I won't overplay my part in that. That was a design that I kind of that was the first project management thing. So I kind of went through the parts list and made sure we had all the bits and pieces to make it. And then I sort of helped to get fire it up basically and bring it to life. And I remember going into the sound room with Steve Grinrod and him, turning it up to like 12 and just the loudest thing you've ever heard. I mean, I knew what an amp sounded like even by that sort of age. Mm-hmm. And it sounded really amazing. I mean, I don't know if you know, but it's also got some diode clipping in it, which is something that we get slagged off for. But funnily enough, so's that amp. Because it actually does a thing which is quite useful, in that it's part of the sound of the Slash reissue, or the original Slash amp, is that it has some LEDs in it, which are part of the sound.
That's cool.
Which, most overdrive pedals have LEDs in them as well. Which,
sure.
As you know.
So I think it's important to understand sort of where you started. And obviously, you mentioned 70 projects. To me, what that translates into is that by the time you started Blackstar, you weren't starting from anywhere near ground zero.
No. And to be honest, especially Bruce. So when Bruce started at Marshall, he was born on a BBC radio relay station in Singapore and in Malaysia. So he was literally born into electronics. And he used to tell me stories about how when he was a kid, his dad, when he was probably less than 10 or around 10, he wanted an amplifier, and his dad just basically said, well, in that corner over there are a load of electronics components and you're going to build one yourself. And he basically, from a very, very early age, he was around valve electronics. So by the time he came to Marshall, when he was probably in his, I guess, because I was 26, so I guess he was about 32 30-ish when he started. He'd already designed lots of amps, and he worked for some small kind of boutique companies in the north of England. And he already had an encyclopedic knowledge of electronics. So the thing with Bruce is that he was different than any other electronic designer that I've ever met, in so much as he was completely, I can't really explain this, but you could say fluent in electronics. Mm-hmm. So when he used to design a circuit, he didn't tend to need to have reference circuits. Do you know, you or I, if we write a letter, we're fluent by the time we get, to the end of school, we're pretty fluent in English and using letters to form sentences and sentences to form paragraphs. Well, Bruce used to be able to just sit there with a blank piece of paper and design pretty much any electronics product. And I'm talking not just valve stuff, but he could do all the digital logic. He could design microcontroller circuits. I mean, when he was at Salford, so he went to Salford, he designed a digital delay unit just because he wanted to and he thought it'd be fun. And that must have been in about 1990, something like that. So probably before Alesis, before the PV stuff, Mm-hmm. So, mate, and there's a lot of people, and the thing with him is he was absolutely no bull sort of person, and he really hated, what can I say? Hate's a strong word, but he had a real issue with a lot of people in our industry who purport to be experts and purport to be engineers, but they're not really. They read on nowadays they read on the internet and they tweak and they tweeze their products, and that's fine and it's great. But Bruce used to have a bit of an issue with that in terms of they don't generally understand exactly what's going on with the electronics. And he used to have this thing about valve amps are not black magic, they're not witchcraft, they're electronic components which can be understood. And that was kind of, so when I was trained by him, I was so lucky. I had 8 years at Marshall working with him every day. And I could go to him with any question around any audio circuit, whether it's valve, transistor, FET, anything like that. And he knew the bloody answer. It was amazing what he knew. And yeah, anybody else who worked with him, who was, privileged to work with him, will tell you the same thing. He was a bona fide electronics kind of, he'd hate me to say it because he's just not like that, but he was a genius. And he was behind some of the sort of latter, when we were there, some of the things that made Marshall famous. I think he was behind the scenes with some of the clever stuff. Mm-hmm. So there were more famous engineers at Marshall, but he was the really clever one who they turned to if they were in trouble, sort of thing. Mm. So what happened is we went on this journey at Marshall. It was bloody amazing, and we designed lots of products. The four of us, it ended up four of us who founded Blackstar. So it was me and Bruce, Richard and Paul. So me and Bruce, the technical guys, and like the listeners. And then Richard was a kind of production engineering person, so really practical builder of things and getting stuff done. And Paul was like more of a marketing, graphics, but great, really, really clever guy. And he's still with the business now. Mm-hmm. He's like my business partner. So the four of us decided to do Blackstar. So bearing in mind, Bruce had a meeting with Jim Marshall every day for 8 years. And I used to spend a lot of time with Jim back in the day. He was getting older at that time, but Jim was still very, very involved in the business. I was there when we did the reissues of the Plexi, and me and Bruce did the reissue of the 1974X, which is the 18 watt, and we built those amps, and me and Bruce actually took them to Jim's office, and Jim listened to them and said which of the prototypes he liked. So Jim was still involved in the business in those days. And it was actually through that process, the process of doing the hand-wired products at Marshall when they reissued them was a real big learning experience, which kind of paved the way for what we did in the early days at Blackstar. So we'd started this really in-depth research around why valve amps sounded the way they did. And that started at Marshall, and that really was like a true passion for us. Understanding properly, technically, why every element of something that's relatively simple, like a Plexi or a JCM 800, there's a lot of interactions, and there's a lot of things that are easy to be overlooked or misunderstood. And then there's some other bits that people say are very, very important and actually don't make that much difference to the sound. So we spent a lot of time at the end of our Marshall days, and then when we left, we had this 3 years in our garden shed where we just went into the most insane amount of detail about why guitar amps sound the way they do and how to make a better sounding guitar amp. And it was all driven by an absolute passion for, because we were also in a band together, so we were recording, we were just trying to get the best sound we possibly could. And but it was all done from a very technical point of view, which I don't know, sometimes maybe people find that threatening. If we say, do you know what, it isn't magic and it's actually physics and stuff, and and it's a scientific approach that can get you understanding and improve the sound, then sometimes people don't like that because they want it to be mystic, and it isn't mystic actually. It's electronics. So So there you go, and that was our approach.
Gotcha. What was, I guess, your intent, your purpose with that?
So we were kind of embarked on this journey of kind of discovery. So I just try and explain a little bit about the level of detail we were going through. So that original research project was really, a lot of it was based around a JCM 800, my 2203 actually, which is exists somewhere, but it's like a real Frankenstein of a thing. And we literally went through every single stage. We went through the output transformer, the power valves. We went through the cathode follower and the tone stack, and every single element, the power supplies. So we did, and what we did is we basically devised tests which isolated each of these elements to determine whether they were important to the sound and how much they were affecting the sound. Mm-hmm. So, and we did some crazy things, like we used to swap whole output transformers with an AB box, which is like really bloody dangerous. It used to scare me to death when Bruce used to, you can imagine, because that's where all the, 600-700 volt stuff is, the DC stuff that kills you. And so to determine whether things like interwine capacitance or, inductance, or which of the parameters really made a difference, we used to do things like get ridiculously large transformers made by a supplier and then very small output transformers. We'd measure exactly all the parameters, and then we'd do A/B tests to listen to which of the parameters was affecting which sound, because there's a lot of stuff that the theory says will be important, but sometimes in practice it isn't. And actually, that's where we found that test in particular was one where we found some really interesting stuff that we do on Blackstar amps that nobody else does. So that was the test that we did at Marshall and then in the garden shed. So we were going through this process of elimination and experimentation. And the massive thing for us was it was all about benchmarking, A/B testing. Something we really were never into was sonic memory. So, a lot of people say, I know what a 67 this sounds like and a 73 one of those. And actually, mate, that's not quite often not true. Unless you have an A/B box to listen between two circuits, it's very, very difficult for people, in our experience, and certainly for anybody I've ever met, to truly be able to remember exactly what a circuit sounds like. You might be able to get a flavor. So any test that we do, and now the number one piece of equipment at Blackstar still is an A/B box. So because it's science, it isn't about, today I woke up and I think it should sound like that, and tomorrow I wake up and think it should sound like that. We always have a compass of a sonic reference that we're trying to beat, or that we're looking towards. But anyway, mate, the reason why Blackstar was we were going through this process, and we really knew we were onto something, because nobody else in the industry was approaching it like that. So there was a lot of bullshit around, and we knew that every product that we did together as a team, we could beat the benchmark that was out there at the time. So we knew that. And then, unfortunately, there was some, when would it be? There should be sort of about 94, 95. There was some instability, let us say, at Marshall. So Jim was getting old, and maybe things weren't being, I don't know, I wouldn't say anything negative about Marshall in the day, but it wasn't a very secure place to be in terms of our team and what we were trying to achieve. So we had a decision to make, which was basically we stay, and maybe things would work out that the team would be broken up. We'd end up maybe having to fire some people, even though the company was making loads of money. Or we go our own way and do our own thing the only thing we had was a belief in ourselves that we could make better sounding guitar amplifiers. Nothing else. So, and bearing in mind, Bruce was the technical director then, I was the R&D manager, Paul was sales marketing director, whatever, So we were very high up in the biggest company in the world for guitar amps at that time. Mm-hmm. And we all said, you know what, we're going to walk away from that. And none of us had very much money because none of us are rich people. And Paul had just had his first child about like the week that he left. And Richard had a young family, Bruce had a young family. And we went out just on a pure belief that we knew we could do better than the state of the art in terms of guitar tone and the flexibility that amps could do. And we felt that bit about really understanding why guitar amps sounded the way they do, we had to complete that. It was like a mission for us, So we left, and we spent 3 years without any money in a garden shed, finding out more stuff and gradually building up some, new circuits and some new ideas, and which eventually became Blackstar. And that's why we did it. It was just purely out of self-belief. And it worked out okay in the end.
Yeah, it seems so.
Yeah.
I have a question.
Yeah.
Ian.
Yeah.
So, who is Blackstar intended for? What kind of player is your target market? Is it the high school garage band? Is it the country rocker? Is it is there some certain sound or some certain audience?
Yeah. Do you know, this is really interesting. When we first started, the idea was that we wanted to be a broad church. So the sort of advances that we've made and innovations that we've made are applicable to all different genres. Because we came from Marshall, people used to think we were just a rock brand. And we actually spent a lot of time, trying to shed that, preconception or whatever, that we're not like that. So, mate, what we do when we design amps, we obviously have our own sound. And I think you can define, it's a good word. You can describe the Blackstar sound as being very well defined. So I don't know when you were just playing the amp earlier on, whether you felt that, but you could play a big chord with a lot of distortion or harmonics, and you still get a lot of definition in the sound. And that was part of what we were always looking for, was that, how do you get that? It's kind of a produced sound, but not in a bad way. Mm-hmm. So it's kind of, if you get what I mean, it's about clarity and a big sound with lots of very defined bottom, lots of very defined top, and very balanced across the frequency response. Yeah, and to tell you the truth, all our products are like that. And so therefore that is a benefit to anybody. So whether we have some amazing country players, we have some, like super, super silly high gain players. We have grungy players. We have loads of people, all different types of genres. But I think coming back to it, that natural balance frequency response, that clarity that you get with the Blackstar and the feel, it's all about feel. So, I can't play, to be honest, a confession. I'm not a very good guitar player unless I've got a good sound. So I think that's helped us, because right from the beginning, I was the one who played guitar. So Bruce was the one who played bass, but he was really clever. So between us, we kind of, so, you know, we'd sit around, mate, and honestly, that's what we used to do. We used to sit in the shed and I'd go, oh, mate, I can't get the amp to do this, and I just wished it'd do that. And that would be the way we drove those initial discussions around, you know, how do we, and then we'd go out and find why, you know, a really high gain valve preamp might sound mushy and doesn't clean up very well sometimes. Some of those older high gain designs don't clean up very well. So we found different ways around that, but it's all driven very much by wanting to get the right sound. So, mate, coming back to what you asked, is they're for everybody who wants a good sound. And I still walk around trade shows and I hear so many bad sounding guitar amps, I'm afraid. I'm sorry, but I do. Because there's kind of no qualification for being a guitar amp designer. You just need to say, hey, I'm a guitar amp designer, and off you go. But sometimes, you know, there's a little bit more to it, to doing it properly. Yeah. And again, I'm sorry, I don't wish to be offensive to anybody. I'm anything other than a snob. And
I don't think that sounds snobby. I think that's just pointing out something that everyone's struggling with. Is like, I want to like things, but sometimes I can't, or I can't figure out how, or why am I doing it wrong? Am I playing this amp wrong? Do I not know how?
Yeah, mate, this is the thing. So, right, coming back to the whole concept was Marshall Plexi, the best sounding rock amp in the world, if you know how to use it, you know, and if you have the right environment to use it. So
that's important.
Same with it, you know, the same with the Twin, the same with the Vox, you know, with an AC30. It has some amazing sound. Now, we've done a lot of work with old AC30s recently. The tone stack in an AC30 is a thing so much in itself, and it has sweet spots, but outside the sweet spots, it can be difficult to use. So
I wasn't friends with my Vox. I mean, honestly, and that might be one of the reasons. Is like Tony loves Vox, but I couldn't get my sound, the sound that I wanted to hear, out of that. Yeah. But that's the reason that we need so many different kinds of things.
Yeah,
it is, and just so. But that kind of, the way that we approach it, which is different to other companies maybe, is that we understand and respect what Vox do with that tone stack. It's kind of a historic thing, right? So, and it's cool. It's cool, and it'll never be beaten for that sound. However, there are things you can do around that tone stack which make it much more usable, right? And so I think we've always said we kind of respect tradition. We respect those old circuits, but we're not slaves to them. So it's almost heretic. You know, our St. James product on our channel that's the most Vox-like, we actually fix the mid in the and I can describe this. We have a separate mid control which works properly, rather than the way a Vox tone stack works. So you get all the nice jangly stuff out of a Vox circuit, but we put a proper mid control in, which is usable. And again, it's just one of those things that we're very much driven by listening, understanding, and then we don't give a shit whether we're doing something that's somehow heretic because we changed the traditional designs. It doesn't matter as long as it sounds better. And we do this we have probably 10 guitarists who listen at the company. You know, there's 40 of us, and there's 20 people in R&D who every day are designing and listening to guitar amps. And we listen, and enough people think we've improved something, then we'll use it. And we don't care whether we don't care if it's a valve, a transistor, a FET, a diode, a piece of digital software, or whatever. We don't care. Yeah. The thing is about trying to get that sound. So one thing I would say to people who listen to us is all our products sound good, because we make sure they bloody do. And it doesn't
T-shirt right
That's
there.
a fair, fair
So
statement,
you know what?
because every Blackstar I've played through it has a very consistent sound across all volume ranges and across all of those tone controls. Yeah,
man. And we our amps sound different because they are different. So all our circuits are different. You know, they're from the bottom up, and it starts with that original design philosophy, which was understand, improve where you can. If you can't improve it, leave it as it is, because it's not about us saying, oh, we designed this. It's all about getting the right sound for the end user. Mm-hmm. And that's why some people maybe don't get on with us and our philosophy, because it's kind of heretic. You know, it doesn't matter to us what technology is.
On the note, so you just you're touching on something that Tony is chomping at the bits to get to, but I just want to mention, like, it sounds like part of the success of Blackstar is that you have done away with the idea that you're chained to a legacy product or element of a brand.
Yeah. Yes. And that comes from, I had 8 years at Marshall. Bruce had 14, 15 years at Marshall. And the best thing was every day we could go to the drawing cabinet. And I remember vividly with the drawing cabinet in the drawing office, you'd open that up and there'd be Plexis in there, there'd be 1974s in there, there'd be JCM100s. And it was such a privilege to work in that environment. However, to do something outside that was a challenge because there was an expectation. Whereas for Blackstar, you know what?
And almost heresy, I imagine.
Yeah, and actually, mate, absolutely, yeah. And we did find that we had to do things sometimes that were technically not right, because if for instance, when we did a all valve amp with Marshall, it had to be all valve, because if we didn't, because we were Marshall, we'd be seen to be somehow some sort of moral and ethical issue. The fact that we might use a transistor. Honestly, people get so passionate about that. And Marshall was scared. I'm honestly, to be honest with you, scared, because people would say, well, you're not Marshall anymore if you use like JCM 900s, that's some op amps in them. And the reason JCM 900 sounded the way they did was nothing to do with the fact it had op amps in it. It was I know the story about JCM 900s. They sounded the way they did because of other things. So when we left, we weren't. One of the main things was to not be bound by that sort of tradition. And again, it's not because we wanted to be different, because that would be bullshit. We're not doing it to be different, because a lot of valve amp designers go, oh well, I tweak this to this and I tweak that to that, so it's my design. I'm different. It's not like that. The reason we did it was because we wanted to understand, and then if something could be improved, we would, and if it couldn't, we left it alone. Mm-hmm. And we still got, some of our circuits, you'll see stuff in there that's really familiar, and it goes back to, Leo Fender's original designs, and which probably went back to radio application manuals before him. Some of the stuff, just basic electronics. And some of the stuff's really, really different, because we think we've found better ways of doing stuff that sounds better or more reliable. And if we think it's better and more reliable, then we do it, because there's nobody there to tell us not to.
Yeah.
If you get what I mean.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, Tony, go ahead.
So, Ian, you have in your product lineup, it seems like maybe even a 50-50 mix between solid state and tube. Do you find that more and more players are more open to solid state amplification?
Yeah, I think so. I think especially high-end digital is very much accepted now, I think. So when we started, digital was seen as kind of cheap and flexible. And now, actually, good high-end digital products are seen as some of the best sounding, most practical products around. So I think that's really, really changed. And the standard of digital products has really, really improved over the last decade. However, there is definitely still a place for valve products. And I think sometimes the technology requires you to simplify things, because to do very, very complicated things in all valve or valve technology is just gets impractical. So it makes you simplify things, and I think that's why people still like valve tones, because the circuit, the signal path tends to be more simple, so therefore it sounds more open sometimes, and you could say, and more dynamic, because it is. Valves are extremely dynamic, in terms of headroom, and in terms of impulse response, are extremely dynamic devices. So in terms of how quick the signal gets from your pick to the speaker, you can't get much quicker than what happens in a valve amp, because it's basically all around about, I guess, the speed of light, really, the way the electrons are moving. And it's such a simple circuit that it's very, very, very dynamic. So I think that's why some people still love all valve amps, and that's why we continue to try and innovate in them, because it gives you something. It still gives you something unique and special, we feel.
Now, I think you just touched on a couple things. First of all,
yeah.
I didn't know. I would think a high-end digital product would be a faster response, but what you just said that made me really think, and that you explained so much about what a tube does in one sentence, and I appreciate that. Thank you. One of the things that I think are important in that conversation is you toggled between solid state and digital. Now, regardless of the actual technology or the actual products, those solid state is a term that is almost archaic in itself, because it became the interim between what was the past and whatever is future, and then solid state just kind of, it is impersonal. It has no soul. It doesn't, right? And then digital is like almost so all-encompassing that it's also doesn't have, so guitar, as musicians and guitar players, we devour things that have quote unquote meaning or importance or magic, right? By nature, those two things do away with that completely. But they're still how we describe these things. So maybe there's a new term that ends up coming out that kind of destigmatizes these terms.
Yeah. And I completely agree. And you're right, because there is solid state isn't mystical, is it at all? But it doesn't mean it can't sound really good. And one thing's for sure, a well-designed solid state amp will sound better than a badly designed valve amp, and that's just a fact. And then a well-designed valve amp and a well-designed solid state amp, well, it depends how much you understand about each of the technologies. To be honest, I mean. So for instance, in the amped product, I don't know, we maybe don't want to move on to that, but I think there's one thing to be said, is that when you end up generating a noise at the end of all this, then especially in the digital domain, it has to kind of, I think, has to go through some solid state devices, because you can't, even a headphone amp is a solid state device. But then if you want to move a speaker, then it goes through a solid state amplifier usually. And even if you have IRs and you go through a PA, you're still going through a solid state device to move the air that you hear. You get what I mean? So unless you, which would be a bit weird, and you could, but unless you use a valve PA, you tend to hear the sound on the stage coming through a PA, which is a very, very linear solid state amp, So if you get what I mean. So there's always some solid state stuff in most systems.
For sure. Well, and I think maybe where the conversation more so now than ever is probably going to kind of fizzle away is that the need state for our for the products that we use are hugely different than even 10 years ago. So small, you're not playing monster amps on stage. Like the idea that people are doing recording in their house. Well, that you need to be accessible. Things are getting smaller and smaller, or the needs are greater.
Yeah.
It's just changed across the board. So I think some of the products that we're going to get into here in just a moment are dealing with that square away, which I think is really brilliant. I did have two things while we're still kind of talking about Blackstar as a whole, and I really appreciate what everything you've said so far, because I think it has done a great deal to lift a veil on what we know, at least here. So, number one, what do you think is the greatest challenge you're facing now as Blackstar?
Oh, do you want me to be honest? To be honest, to be honest, do you know what's really difficult is recruiting good engineers.
Okay.
That's really difficult. Yeah, so please go to blackstaramps.com // recruitment jobs and join the band or something that it's called.
Is there a bulletin board at the
there definitely is. And to tell you the truth, I've personally had a policy with my team, engineering team, mate. We're always hiring because it's so difficult to get the right people, and the right people, when they come along for our business, make all the difference. You know, we've got, like I say, we've got between about 17 to 20 in R&D, and we've got maybe half a dozen like really skilled engineers, you know, design engineers. Because, mate, to be a design engineer and know what you're doing, it's 4 years at university. Then I think it's a decade before you're actually a good design engineer. Mm-hmm. And there aren't many of them around. So I'd say that's probably the biggest challenge that we have as a company. The rest of it I've got completely under control, nothing to worry about.
Okay.
Do you believe me? Do you believe me?
You're everywhere, so your marketing department is definitely good.
Yeah.
And, and the consistency is right there. The quality is there. So,
and based on the people that we've already, that set all this up, I mean, it's aces, absolute aces.
Great team. Great team.
So, okay, the last one while we're in the Blackstar world, before we get into products, is what are you most proud of with Blackstar?
Do you want me to say personally for me? I've met some. Well, I'll tell you what. Being here in whatever 15 years after we started, when we couldn't give anybody to give us any money, and it was so difficult because who wanted another guitar amp? You know, trying to get investors to invest in us back in the day was bloody hard work. So to still be here after 15 years and to be a strong, really strong business with a great, honestly, I had my Christmas party was on Friday, and there was 40 people. So it was like maybe 30 plus partners of the team. And the average age was kind of probably early 30s. So me and a few of the others were dragging that down really badly. And you know what? And they were just all getting on, and they're all talking about music, and they're all so into it, And I work. I often leave the office at 5:30. So I get in at 8. I leave the office at 5:30, 6 o'clock. So I've got a young family trying to get home at some point. And I've got I've often got people working in the lab, and because they're just so passionate about what they do. Mm-hmm. And we try and develop that team. So that's the other thing. The thing I'm proud of most is still to be here and for the team to be driving it forward, and being so into what they do, because that's what it's all about.
That's awesome. I appreciate you sharing that. I think it's worth mentioning, even reminding our own selves here that, I remember when we were talking with Strymon, they're like, guys, we're not a big company. We're like, like 6-7 people. And we're like, what? Yeah. Because you think when you're looking at these things, like, this can't be made by 6 or 7 people. Like, the things that you're making are incredible.
Yeah. Mate, and so there's 2 bits to this, right? So I'll be like totally open with you. People don't know who Blackstar are. So, and we don't manufacture in the UK. So we manufacture in China. So I've had experience in manufacturing loads of places, including the UK, because Marshall still got a factory in the UK. I was involved with that. So, I've done the whole thing. But for us, we really try and focus on what we're good at. And what we're good at is the design bit. That's our real passion. The sound, the branding, the design. That's what we love doing. And we could open a factory, but we couldn't do it any better than another factory down the road, right? So in terms of something that we can be truly world-class in, that's why we do the design. But then I think that people shouldn't underestimate or undervalue the fact that we invest a lot of money every month in designing guitar products. More than certainly any other UK brand. In terms of design, we probably spend significantly more than any other brand on design, So I think sometimes it's easy to knock Blackstar with they manufacture in China and they're this, that, and the other. Well, actually, the reason we do that is because we want to spend our time designing great guitar amps. And we know we can get, and again, this is heretic and it's not very magical, but we know we get amazing quality with our partners that we have in China. They're the best, some of the best in the world. And whether it's China, maybe in the future we'll manufacture in the US, who knows? Right. As long as we get a consistently great product, we don't, again, I wouldn't say we don't care, but it's less important to us than doing
it's less
the
important
product
to
itself.
The audience too. I honestly, I think that the guard of where is kind of past because people just want good stuff, and I think we all realize, especially with newer generations, that the world is so much smaller of a place than it used to be, and it's that's just the way the wind is, Hey everybody, it's Todd again. So remember at the beginning of the episode, I told you this was part 1 of 2 featuring Blackstar. We hope you enjoyed the interview that you heard already. We certainly did. Hopefully you can tell we had a blast talking with Ian, and we learned just an absolute ton about this brand that often goes maybe unappreciated. So hopefully you have a new, enlightened understanding of who Blackstar is. In the next episode, we're going to talk about 2 of their really fantastic products that are recently released, and very excited about those. So be looking for that after this episode. Thanks a lot.
Well, that's it for these knobs. Please visit our Patreon page at patreon.com/theguitarknobs. Visit our website at theguitarknobs.com for all of our past episodes, 4 on the Floor blog, and other good stuff. You can connect with us on social too at our Facebook page, and share your gear and stories on our Facebook group. Also, be sure to check out our Instagram at Guitar Knobs. Catch you next time.